Welcome everyone to the Innovate, Iterate, Integrate Strategies for Accelerating Technology Readiness in Clean Energy panel. We are bringing together passionate experts to discuss the iterative processes of refining technologies, prototyping, validating performance, gaining customer support, and deploying novel clean energy technologies. This four-person panel will be moderated by Candyce Marsh, Manager of Transportation Electrification at Duke Energy. Our four panelists are Jay Vitha, VP of Strategy at MetOx, Alexina Jackson, VP of Strategic Development at AES, Miles Palmer, co-founder of 8 Rivers Capital, and Haroon, Inam, CEO of DG Matrix. We're excited about the discussion, and we hope you are too. Keep your questions in mind and feel free to submit them to Slido via the QR code at the bottom right. Thanks, and let's get started. I'll pass it over to Candyce, and you can take it from here. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start off with some introductions. So the question that we're going to ask this wonderful panelists are, who are you, and what does your company do?
Hey, everyone. My name is Jay Vitha. I graduated from Duke in 2014 and from the Nicholas School in Fuqua in 2020. It's a pleasure to be back and very excited to be here at the Energy Conference. I'm currently the VP of Strategy at MetOx. We are a manufacturer of high-temperature superconducting wire, a copper wire alternative, and alternative conductor technology. When cooled with liquid nitrogen, high-temperature superconducting wire can carry up to 250 times the current of copper wire. When used in grid cables, this enables transmission of power about 10x what current copper cable technology can do. And as you heard Dr. Toon mention earlier, without high-temperature superconducting wire, the companies attempting to create pilot technology in the nuclear fusion space would not be able to do so. Very excited to hear the rest of the panel's thoughts on accelerating technology.
Hi, Alexina Jackson with the AES Corporation. We are actually a pretty big company. We do everything from renewable energy development, owning and operating. We do utility work serving customers through delivery of energy. We also have a standalone innovation company, New Energy Technologies. And we do this with a great presence in the US, but we also operate in 13 additional countries. So what that means for my work is I lead a team that is looking at reimagining the grid end to end, everywhere from that utility scale generation through the delivery of energy and into the homes, commercial areas, and industries that drive our economy. We're learning lessons from all around the world, both through our businesses and through the work we do with our partners. And so I have the great privilege of finding that through line for system level change, where both generators, line owners, and eventually also, of course, regulators come together and find a way to make sure that all of us who consume energy, pay for that energy, enjoy the full benefits of a digitally enabled, dynamic electrical grid.
Hi, I'm Miles Palmer. My company and I are local here in Durham, founded here in 2008. I have the great good fortune to have founded 2 unicorn companies in the energy space. The first one, Net Power, went public on the New York Stock Exchange this year, and the second one reached $1 billion valuation this year as well, total about $5 billion. And getting there is a consequence really of what we are doing, which is to first make energy cheaper, but also insist that it be clean energy. Clean energy that is more expensive than dirty energy will have problems in market adoption. The government can subsidize things to a certain extent, and as well they should, but long-term energy technologies have to be cheaper to get to full-scale market adoption and foster world prosperity. And really, world prosperity is what we're about. Climate is a piece of that, but it's also about having a good living for your families and your society. And so what 8 Rivers is focused on is bringing clean energy to the marketplace that is cheaper than the dirty energy it replaces.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Haroon, Inam. I have 2 Duke degrees from 84 and 86. I've moved back to this area. I'm co-founder and CEO of DG Matrix, which stands for Distributed Generation or Digital Grid. Today, we're making edge-of-the-grid power electronics. We're about a year old. Our first product is a fast DC charger that's 1/4 to 1/10 the size of anybody else in the market. That includes ABB, Eaton, Schneider, Siemens, ChargePoint, EVgo, or anyone else. We also have the ability to add renewable energy to EV charging or to microgrid applications, thereby eliminating grid constraints, which is huge. And we can lower your cost for charging the EV, or we can power up your building with our multi-port device. No one has a technology like this today. In the last 6 to 8 months, we have developed over $1 billion sales pipeline. And there are many corporate strategics that want to invest in our company. Very glad to be here. Thank you very much.
So moving on to our first question. And that question is, what's a potential transformative energy-related technology that is exciting you?
Sure, I'm happy to start. I'm going to talk about cables in the electric grid, a very old technology that it's about time we've had some innovation around. In the industry, we've actually done a pretty good job with wind and solar and renewables and reimagining how power is going to be generated. And through the use of electric vehicles, we've done a good job of determining how energy is going to be used. We have not done a great job of reimagining how electricity is going to be moved. And with superconducting cables, as I mentioned before, you're able to move transmission level power at distribution level voltages in the same right of way by focusing on carrying more current rather than carrying more voltage, which can reduce some of the needs for things like substation technology and potentially eliminate substations if you're already at that medium distribution voltage, bringing in the power that we know our cities are going to need with the electrification of transportation and buildings.
I'm really glad you're focused on that technology because I agree that we need to increase transmission capacity as quickly as possible. At AES on my team, we think about a toolbox of solutions. So we don't pick just one technology because the grid is not a modular copy and repeat type system, right? We need to address the unique topology, i.e. the way the grid is structured. And so you need a toolbox of solutions. One of the solutions that we're very excited about because it answers near-term needs are other solutions that also address the transmission capacity requirement. Excuse me, I'm going to take the right of 2 technologies, but it also illustrates how they work together. So we're very excited about something called dynamic line rating, which is an asset-light device. Usually there is a sensor associated, but it allows you to see the actual throughput capability of your wires. Currently, we leave a lot of energy space behind in our wires for a very good reason. For conservatism, we want the system to work. But as we become more digital and more capable of measuring and understanding our grid in real time, we can actually put more energy through the system without building new lines, right? So we need new transmission, we need higher power energy lines, but we also need these asset-light technologies that allow us to make use of what we already have in place. And when you take that sort of visibility and combine it with something like a battery device, you can firm up that dynamic nature of the grid, right? Because it's impacted strongly by weather, by wind flow, the angle of the wind across the conductor, the line. And when you combine things like storage and that real-time dynamic visibility of the line itself, you can create something that can be relied upon, and with very low cost and at very quick time, we can put more energy onto the grid quickly.
Well, I actually can't pick one. There's 2 things, but I'll make it quick. First is a public announcement coming in the next several weeks of our first multi-billion-dollar commercial project, groundbreaking. And I can't tell you where it is, except it's in the United States. The lawyers would kill me if I divulged anything more. The second thing is much more of a futuristic thing. That is, where our company heartbeat and revenues will be in that commercial plant, and the next ones to follow in the next year or two. But personally, what motivates me is the future of technology. You have to keep evolving the technology. And one of the problems that we've set about trying to solve at 8 Rivers is fixing the solar intermittency problem. Traditionally, you think of storing the energy in batteries or whatever, but there's another way to do it, is to go where the sun shines 24 hours a day. If you go far enough out in space, in geosynchronous orbit and above, the sun shines 24 hours a day. If you generate electricity up there, you can beam it to Earth. All of the large world powers in the world today are working on that technology. Now, it's for military applications. It's extremely expensive, not at all relevant to commercial applications. But at 8 Rivers, we believe if we can lower the cost of space launch enough to get to the point where it's cheaper to go to the moon than it is to go to Europe, then we can build those space power stations in space and beam the power to Earth, and we can go 100% solar power on Earth. And that would be a great thing to do, but it depends on low-cost space launch, and we're dedicated to trying to make that happen with a hydrogen technology that we've developed at 8 Rivers.
Thank you. Very exciting. I think what makes me get up every morning is a product, a set of products we're working on. I think being able to augment a grid, which apparently does not have enough juice to power all the EVs, does not have enough juice to power the electrification needs. If we can combine fuel cells, AC generators of any type, multi-fuel generators, batteries, solar, wind, all in an ultra-compact unit that can power up villages where there is no electricity, enable hospitals, medical clinics, small industry in the middle of Nigeria, Indonesia, in remote villages of Saudi Arabia, you are creating something that is a cellular micro-utility. You can transform the planet, just like Eric Toon said. Edge of the grid power electronics has the capability to change 1 billion+ lives in the world, all through renewable energy and without building a massive infrastructure of generation and transmission, which does keep a lot of the power alive today. That's what excites me. What also excites me is the fact that our factory footprint is 1/10 the size of our closest competitors. That's because we're really focused on how to use extremely low material. That's how we got it so small with the new technology. So your carbon footprint in making that unit is going to be far smaller. We only need 20 people to run a $100, $200 million a year factory to assemble the units. 20 to 25, our competition needs 200. That's what excites me. It also excites me to work with my co-founder, who has a far bigger brain than I do, but I have a far bigger mouth than he does. Thank you.
So our next questions are going to come from the concept of obstacles to technology adoption. There are going to be 3 questions. So our first question is, pick one of your technologies that you're working on. What challenges are you facing? What pressures do you face from investors to get technology to the market?
Yeah, so happy to jump in here. I think in terms of challenges, the challenges that we face in doing demonstration projects with the technology come largely from regulatory pressures that are put on utilities and developers that make them slow and unlikely to adopt technologies quickly. And there's a lot of things that we can do to break down those barriers. For example, we've had some good success identifying pilot and demonstration projects done in other countries, in other grids in the US, and being able to lean on studies that have come out of those projects where the technology has been successfully deployed to help accelerate the adoption process within a utility that's never worked with the technology before. We need to get better at that. And that's something that we're working very hard at in terms of getting our superconducting cables into the ground. In terms of investors, one of the greatest challenges that companies working with new technologies face is financing first-of-a-kind manufacturing facilities. There are lots of investors that are happy to invest early on, seed and Series A, where they can write a single $1 million check and get a double-digit ownership stake in the company. There are also many investors who are happy to finance your third manufacturing plant and give you $300 million at a valuation of $1 billion. There's a big gap there, and I don't know necessarily that the investment community has risk adjusted appropriately in that gap between Series A finance and the kind of Series C. There's a lot of great companies in there that are building these plants and doing these projects, and it's harder than you would think to kind of make a match there as a company looking for that type of financing.
Thanks. I think what we find, what we have found, initially found to be challenging is how do you get something down to 1/4, 1/10 the size of anybody else? What we have also found is how do you reduce the time of manufacturing something like this to 1 labor hour, not 20 or 30 labor hours. So what we've done is we've built a factory model right next to a fabrication shop. Our team runs 18 hours a day, different teams. They run 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. In a typical week, we can go through 80 different manufacturing and mechanical iterations. And that's how we've eliminated a whole rat's nest of wires. We have cleaned up the design where it looks like a work of art. And then we've focused on the firmware and controls, which are incredibly tough. In the last 6 months, as of Monday, we have gone through 3,491 firmware and electronics iterations. That is incredible. And that's why the controls, which are incredibly complex, have been now dumbed down to a timing of 10 billionths of a second precision to get record-breaking efficiency. So I think fast iterations and then working with customers saying, this is what you want. It's a classic example of the lean startup, right? The commercial iterations with technical iterations. And that's how we're getting ready to scale very small factories. Thank you.
Can I just add a quick observation? Because I think both of you have said very, very important points, right? Regulatory, financing, risk tolerance, speed of iteration, right? Being able to continuously improve. But for us too at AES, we're really focused on accelerating the future of energy. And so we want to see in a traditionally sort of conservative environment, how do we move quickly, right? To decarbonize at the pace and scale that we need to in order to, hit our goals in the US around 2035 electrical system decarbonization, to help our world avoid the worst parts of climate change. That speed and that scale becomes really important. So I think, for us, we think day in, day out of how we continue to accelerate all the time.
So taking this concept a little further, how often is your process or technology improved upon? How do you relay that to stakeholders?
I'm happy to jump in. I know that you just described that, I think, at some length, but certainly for us, as we think about our stakeholders and how we bring the need to iterate to life for them, right? I just mentioned how working in a conservative industry, sometimes that seems scary. A lot of the times, we're also trying to convince engineers to take change where if you think about a lot of the engineers who are protecting our electrical system, they see themselves as first responders. Right? They are people who are protecting a huge, valuable machine built over 100 years. They have an important job. And so one of the things that we do is we try and bring demonstration size projects into the grid. As I mentioned at the beginning at AES, we have generation assets. We also have utility assets. So we can actually go into our utility and show how something I mentioned, dynamic line rating, how that can deploy across a variety of lines. We can take the data that comes out of that deployment and then write white papers that show our lessons learned. And then since we're trying to create system level change, share those insights with the industry so that all of us can start making that change, at that faster rate that I was mentioning. And in a utility space, one of the good things we have in regulation, let's say every once in a while regulation's a good thing, we're not as competitive with each other. So we can share those insights, right? I can go to a utility and say, hey, look, this is what I learned, and that's not a detriment to my competitive position. So I certainly encourage everyone to think about how we get deployment scale projects out there quickly, and how we make the information we learn from that accessible so that we all can rise together to the challenge of transforming our system.
I think I'm just going to add one more thing, extremely important point you brought up. How do you ensure the grid or power availability remains at a very high level, high 90s, 99.9, whatever. I think when we started this, we wanted to focus on reliability. So we went after the top reliability program in the world. And we got their top professor to technically advise us on how you build in reliability down to the micron level. And so when we start to show our customers, hey, this is how we've designed reliability. You have water pouring down the side of the unit and can keep running. You can vibrate the whole unit until competitor parts will shake off and our unit keeps running. That is one heck of a video to show how you design reliability from the ground up. Ultimately, reliability is only proven in the field, but if you don't do your homework, things are going to come off. And I think we're addressing the part that 25 to 30% of fast chargers don't work very well in the field. So you've got to design that reliability in and show that to your customers and involve them in the process to learn from their databases on what has failed. I think involving customers and letting them know about key metrics, in addition to reliability, is how you keep them informed on a regular basis. Solicit their feedback. Thank you.
So our last question in the obstacles to technology adoption is around how do you determine how you use your R&D spending to improve existing products or services while creating new technologies?
Yeah, I can quickly address that. R&D is essential. We need to continue to improve our products, although they're new technologies. The demonstrations are often happening alongside the adoption of the technology, and therefore it's important to be able to iterate quickly, as Haroon mentioned, and ensure that any issues that arise are things that can be easily fixed with the next generation of your technology. So we have a large focus on R&D alongside manufacturing.
So our next set of questions are going to be about scaling and bringing technologies to market. The first question is, what is the jobs to be done for your customers within the technology you develop? How do customers inform your decision on investing in developing new technologies?
So with 8 Rivers, we took sort of an innovative modeling approach. We talked a lot with the Kauffman Foundation, and according to what they found, 8 Rivers was the only company that they had known that had tried this model, which was to basically pick the biggest problems and try to address those in a very innovative way without having really the capital of a large company that you would typically assume would be needed to do something like that. And certainly there are a lot of people that told us that, well, don't try to do that, you'll fail. And I think we certainly would have failed if we'd tried to go the traditional route of angel venture, and going public. The way that we did it really was with modeling. But the modeling was extremely high fidelity and very rigorously done, both technically and economically, and that turned out to be extremely important. When we could prove first to people in the government and later to people in industry that we really had a way to have our cake and eat it too, that we had a way to make clean energy that was actually cheaper than dirty energy. It took us a while to convince people to even take a look at it, and that's where Duke University really helped us get over that hurdle. By being friends with us, Duke University introduced us to some people that got us in the door to some major corporations whose engineers then checked our numbers. And so the customers in this case were not the end customers, they were the customers for taking the technology from a concept to engineering and to hardware. And basically all of the funding for our company from the initial capital that my partner and I put in was basically free capital by major strategic companies in the United States that were inspired by what we were trying to do at large scale to change their industry to make clean energy cheaper than dirty energy. And they were inspired to spend their own company's money to check our numbers. And in checking and validating our numbers, they were then our advocates in partnering and investing in our company to get us where we are today.
So I'd love to jump in and mention that our customers are such a critical part of the equation at AES. If you look at some of the things that have made the news about what we've achieved, a lot of the time it's in co-creation with our customers. It's understanding what it is that they need, what those insights are from their pain points, to use a sort of out of a textbook term. But really getting in that deep dialogue. I mentioned that we're here to accelerate the future of energy. The last part of our purpose is together. And it's that together collaboration that's such a big part of that customer relationship. As we get those insights, we definitely bring that innovative concept of, love the problem, not the solution. So we want to make sure that we're focused on being very critical of our paths to delivering solutions to those needs. So we have a great governance process to ensure that we don't fall into the founder's challenge of loving the solution so much that we fail to see that there might be a better path. So really innovation at AES is happening throughout the organization with support of our C-suite, with the support of our board, and also through multidisciplinary approaches. Again, at the heart of that, though, is our customer, because our energy system is here to serve those who consume the energy, right? So if we think about what we're doing day in and day out, we're making sure that we are delivering safe, reliable, and affordable energy. And we hope to continue doing that. The magical machine that is the grid has been doing that for 100 years. And so as we think about what makes our business run every day, we're thinking about that customer at the end who is consuming that load and how we can do that increasingly better.
Yeah, would like to just add two things there. One of the things that's been really critical for us is getting to know our customer's customer as well. So going further down the value chain and figuring out what types of solutions they're looking for so that we can best serve our customers with the products and technology that they need. And a lot of those conversations begin by saying, without a new technology like this, what are your options? How would you solve this challenge with the existing set of technologies? A good example is IEA has predicted that to reach net zero by 2050, we'll have to mine 700 million metric tons of copper to create all these new devices and technologies. Throughout all of human history, we've mined 700 million metric tons of copper. So we're supposed to double all of history's output in the next 23 years. It's not going to happen. And so we need to start making choices about where we use these resources, and starting to have those conversations with our customer and their customer and everyone down the value chain has been a pretty effective strategy.
So rounding out our conversation around scaling and bringing technologies to market, the final question is, how do you educate customers on the use cases and how to use your technologies?
Sure, I'll take a first stab at that one. I'll give you an example. We were talking with somebody on Thursday. My colleague, another Duke grad, Michael Wood, is up there. We were engaged with a customer. The call started with, hey, I was asked to talk with you by my COO, but I already have a great solution. Okay, well, thank you. Then we explain, what we're doing. How do we harness fleet energy? How do we harness fleet energy? And why we have something unique that can power up buildings. We have something unique that can power up a HVAC from scratch. We can start a building from a dark start. We can clear a fault, blow a fuse. I said, have you thought about that? Have you tried that? Well, they hadn't. And then we showed them our multi-port engine. We said, have you thought about this? And they said, well, this is kind of like what our drawing looks like, but it has a lot more parts. We're like, yeah, well, it's probably 10, 20 times bigger. and you're probably having these issues. They're like, yeah, we are. So to us, that was a sort of a ratification of months of listening to customers. 35 minutes later, he said, how fast can I get your product to test out? And so it's an account that's worth over $100 million to us over 5 years. And I think when you listen to people, you're solving their problems, you let them know, you keep them informed, have them test it out, lead them down a classic path where they get increasingly comfortable with your technology and with your company's bankability, right? They don't want somebody that's going to be a flash in the pan and then go out of business tomorrow. They don't want somebody there, they sink in $500,000, $1 million a site, and suddenly you don't exist. So that's the other part that we're working on. Hey, how do we attract the capital, not just the first X million, but the next 100 million? How do we make sure they understand we're already at 100 engineers and we're going up to about 400? How do we show them how many PhDs and MBAs we have in the pipeline to hire to be the future C-levels and technocrats that can take this company up the value chain? So I think you have to share that whole vision and the capability to convince them that it's not just the tech. There's a whole organization being created to support the system. Thank you.
Our next conversation is going to be around talent and generating ideas. So how does your organization go about selecting new talent?
So I'm happy to jump in saying we're here today, right? We've got a great table over where we ate lunch, so please make sure to stop by. But I think part of it too is we recognize that certainly on my team we check in on this regularly, but why are we here, right? Why are we doing the work that we're doing? And I think it's a fantastic opportunity for me to be a part of AES because we are really focused on really creating that decarbonized grid of the future from generation through delivery and to the customer needs. Our customers want this green energy, right? We do work in sort of a privileged space of serving a lot of big customers like data centers, a lot of utilities who are looking for this green energy. And that is probably one of the best things that we can do to attract talent, is to show that purpose and the impact that we can have. At AES, we do have the scale, not just in the US, but in other places around the world. And so bringing that and making that clear to the talent that is here in this room and where we go to attract it, I think is one of the best sales tactics that we can have. We're waking up as a great place to work where we care about our mission. And I can say also the flexibility that I myself have experienced at AES. I was hired in originally as an attorney to the organization, and here I am talking to you as someone leading a group of innovators who is unlocking value for our organization, but also for the world. So it really is a place where if you have that spark of innovative insight and you put your energy behind it, you're able to create. I created my job and I get to do it. And that's a huge amount of support from my organization.
I think, thank you, that's great. I think what I've learned over many years of bringing in talent is you're not bringing in people to work for you. You're bringing in people to work with you. Mm-hmm. You're helping them create their careers to be future leaders, to be future owners of businesses. You're helping them gain a set of experiences that they're not going to gain anywhere else. That's why you attract top talent. I've had more than my share of straight A PhDs and top MBAs, and the ones that stay are the ones that see that career growth. And the ones that leave, many of them come back because the idea is not to hold on to people. The idea is to develop lifelong relationships, and that's how you build a system where the talent comes to you. And I think A-grade players, they attract A-grade players. It's absolutely true. And B-grade players, they only hire C-grade players. So I think you've heard this story, right? Many times. It's a Silicon Valley story that I lived for a decade over there. But you really have to be very careful. And when you're hiring A-grade players, make sure the arrogance is not there. Because if they're arrogant, they're going to spoil the whole culture. And this new millennial generation is so much more aware of that, which I think is fantastic. So much more aware of a clean planet and a vision. And so we're learning from the younger generation how to create a better culture for sustainability and for cooperation. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think there's two tracks of talent that we are constantly evaluating. The first refers to people like all of you, business students, engineers. In one sense, it's actually not that hard to attract people like you, as evidenced by how many people are in the room right now, to think about these problems and care about them. What is much harder is getting those operators on a manufacturing floor to buy into your mission, to be able to retain them long term. Workforce is a critical part of infrastructure. The people in this room are brilliant, but we're not going to be physically building these technologies ourselves, and we need to have really good strategies about identifying the skills from other industries that can help us develop our workforce so that we can actually bring these technologies to market quickly, cost effectively, and at really high quality. And so that's something we're really focused on right now as we scale up our manufacturing plant.
So how do your companies go about generating new ideas for technologies that you may have to invest in? Do you partner with other companies? How do you transfer knowledge? And what type of networking events do you do?
Well, at Eight Rivers, usually in the past and still at the present, we primarily look at the global problems. And we started out and we're still looking at really the largest problems, the ones that are sort of the drivers for the world energy economy. And by doing that, when we come up with something, it's basically interesting and inspirational enough both to get people to partner with us and look into what we're doing to try to figure out if it's really true or not, and also come and work with us. And it's been really gratifying, particularly the last couple of years, that as the news has sort of gotten out about what we're doing, that people from all over the world are coming to us and saying, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to figure out how I can help Eight Rivers do that.
I think there are, that's great, many corporate frameworks for how you select ideas that go through filters of intellectual property. Do you have the talent? Has anybody on the planet ever done this, or is this made out of unobtainium? And you look at how, well, really, it's how big is the market and so forth, right? I think you have to have the fundamental framework like this, but in a lean fashion, because a young startup, even with 100, 150 people, can't go through what a company with 20,000 people can go through. So you have to understand the essence of that framework as you select ideas. And then you have to say, well, can we really leapfrog? That's how we made that decision to go with our initial tech applied to huge markets. Huge markets, very key, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to make an impact. And I'm at an age where I may have 2 more decades, if I'm lucky, left on the planet, and I want to leave a big impact, if I can, by helping other people's lives. So my selection criteria is how many lives will it impact, in addition to having a large market. Thank you.
I think just jumping in there, I think that one thing that AES can do in this space of innovation is that we can play that role of picking up the great ideas that smaller companies really create and foster through to a stage of effectively deployment-ready size, and then come in with our very practical commercial insight and experience and say, okay, we can help. You mentioned the financing challenge earlier. We can help de-risk and bridge that financing gap by partnering in a deep and actually collaborative way. We bring in collaboration plans. We don't just want to invest seed capital. We don't want to just dabble. We want to apply focus and deep collaboration with our partners because we recognize the power of being that 20,000 plus size company, right? And what we can do by putting these great technologies into commercial deployment, right? Showing that there is the good investment there to be made. And through that footprint, whether on a global basis, be able to bring it to scale.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a really easy example. I could approach a cable manufacturer and say, I would like to sell you wire. Or I could approach the cable manufacturer and say, our partners at AES, for example, would like to build a cable through downtown, wherever, with our wire. And the difference in being able to sell that project is tremendous because we've got that strategic partnership. We've identified the value to our customer. And so that's something that we leverage all the time in building these ecosystems of all the partners that it takes to do these demonstration projects and making sure that everyone's on the same page and that everyone's participating together.
Well, before we hop into Q&A, I want to give the panel time for any final remarks.
One final remark I'd make is something I've thought quite a lot about, but it's sort of in this panel crystallized it a bit for me, looking out, being at Fuqua. I mean, normally I'm a technologist, although I've had to be a business person, obviously. But I started as a technologist. But what I realized is that with technology, the key is the cost. And you can say it's cheaper, but you really have to prove it with your own analysis and prove it to other people. And what I found in my career, entrepreneurial career, is that money people don't understand technology, and technology people don't understand cost estimation. And it's true. And it's really at the juncture between understanding the technology and doing good cost estimating that is the heart of entrepreneurship. And I think that has been a key element at 8 Rivers, is that we've been able to have the talented people who could meet there in the middle.
That's excellent. My final statement will be something on the softer side. Find something you absolutely love about clean energy. Make sure it's a huge market. That's it. You'll find it's going to be such a pleasure to do it.
Yeah, I will comment certainly that what we need to do here requires coalition. It requires everyone on board, right? No one of us is going to do this alone. So as you think about what your next steps might be, recognize that there's not one single perfect job out there. That actually, if we do this right, we'll all be working together. You may be employed by different companies, but we'll need to come together to find how our organizations advocate together for change, are able to bring that excitement and that vision, that clarity to these huge changes that we need, right? We need to encourage everyone forward. We need to inspire that change, because what we're doing is hard and it's big, and it will transform our society, everything from regulation to the technology to the data that we can see to the markets and how they work, and ultimately, I hope, to our own abilities and as individual consumers of energy, how we engage with energy. And so as you conceive of the scale of that change, just recognize that we all have a role if we choose to have it, and that there's so many opportunities to do this and to do it together.
Well, let's say thank you to our panelists. It's time for Q&A.
Great. We have one. It is on. Great. This was a really popular question with many of our audience members. What roles will artificial intelligence play in the future of the clean energy solutions? And are AI solutions included in your company's strategies? And if not, why or when will they?
Yes, absolutely. In the manufacturing space in particular, we can learn so much more about what our equipment is doing, what types of processes need to be improved on, and when. We can learn that in real time. And having AI and machine learning able to break that down for us, and that will give all of our technologies, if you do include AI and machine learning in your strategies, a big advantage over competitors that aren't using those technologies to adjust their processing in real time.
The first time we used AI was in 1989 for machine diagnostics. That's before many people in this room were born. And we had amazing success. We're using AI to diagnose machine failure in the field, and simplify how installers come or electricians come and repair the machine. There's a huge dearth of electricians in the country, worldwide, as we electrify. You got to dumb down that whole process. So what we're doing is we're using AI in the cloud or in units, inference engines that are inside our units that quickly diagnose right down to the actual part, and then the replaceable line unit issue instructions of how to improve it. The second place we're using AI is in design iterations for our very proprietary liquid cooling technology. And by using AI and trying different patterns of how to cool intricate little transistors, we're learning things we never thought we would learn. So it's pretty neat to see machines doing the work for you.
Yep, so at AES we do have a specific strategy that's been cross-functionally developed, seen at our C-suite level, seen at our board level. And just to keep it brief, I'll say that I think there are three key stages of AI assist in the electrical system. There's that efficiency in things like, where are you trimming trees for the greatest impact? There is prediction, right? So how are we anticipating weather events that could actually have impact on the grid or on our generation assets? And then you can also think about human assist. So as we get greater visibility of the grid, for example, how might we identify mitigation solutions to thermal violations with advancing technologies and that toolbox that I talked about. So absolutely valuable.
Our next question is more sort of careers oriented. For students with minimal entrepreneurial experience, what types of skills would you encourage Duke graduate students to gain?
I'll take that one. So I've worked at Duke Energy almost 2 decades, and I have not had the same job the entire time. I came into Duke as an accounting and finance person, so I'm happy I'm in business school because you all are not yawning. Most people find finance and accounting extremely boring. But I spent almost 5 to 10 years in that arena doing different things. I came in what is called property, plant, and materials. So I managed our capital portfolio of projects. And I took that and moved into where we were building our combined cycle, so our major generation gas plants. And so I've been able to tick and tie and build my career in stepping stones. And so during this time while I was at Duke, I also was doing some things away from Duke in the entrepreneurial space, working and filling gaps in some small boutique consulting firms. And then that is where I got my experience around electric vehicles. And so thinking about that experience, it got me to see a whole new problems to be solved from a customer perspective. And so when this job came open and when Duke is really focusing on electric vehicles, I had some tools in my toolkit. So it's not going to be a linear path, but if you can have a story to tell that's a building block of transferable skill sets, you can certainly grow and have a career that's not grounded in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I would add attitude is everything, and it's really hard to stay optimistic given how great our challenges are and how insurmountable some of them seem at times. But I think having that can-do attitude is really good. And then the other thing, I'll speak on behalf of the alumni, call us. Everyone from Duke will always take your call, and so please reach out, and we'll be able to connect you to people who can help.
I think I just want to add a quick one. It's unfortunate that Michael Jordan played at UNC. He had a great statement, though, which is that the reason I've taken so many winning game shots is nobody knows how many shots I missed, and I lost the fear of failure. Vinod Khosla has that on top of the Khosla Ventures website. Lose the fear of failure. Lose the fear of hearing no and of listening actively. And I think that's probably a huge skill set that you can develop. Learn how to talk with customers. Thank you.
So maybe switching gears, there's been a lot of conversation on Duke's campus about the IRA. And a couple of participants are really curious about how is the IRA changing your business? And can you comment on how higher interest rates in particular are impacting the energy innovation sector and how businesses are investing either in R&D or on capital side?
Yeah, I'll make a comment there. The IRA doubled our company valuation overnight. We didn't plan on having the IRA. We plan all of our technologies to be cheaper and have a higher return on investment in IRR than the technologies they're competing with, without any government subsidy or tax benefits or anything. So the IRA came in and added, virtually doubled the IRA on our first project that we're going to be breaking ground on in a few weeks. So from that point of view, it's excellent. The problem is that technologies that are enabled by the IRA that then don't become cheaper after the IRA goes away, that's problematical. Our technologies will continue on, the profit margins will go down, but since we weren't planning on it, we don't have to depend on that. And I would encourage everyone who looks at doing anything in life, not just energy related, but look at things from a apples to apples comparison. The IRA is great. Of course, we fully support it because it's extremely advantageous to us at 8 Rivers. But the government can't keep subsidizing, more expensive technologies forever. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, exactly. Business is war. And in the war, the low cost and absolute minimization of material and whatnot is so core. You gotta win without IRA. And let IRA be the fuel while it lasts, but I'm totally with my colleague. Do it without the IRA.
Agree. Model without those subsidies in your model as well. Have that scenario in case they go away. But also make sure that you're highlighting to your customers that by taking advantage of your technology, they too can be qualifying for things in the IRA. And so it's helped tremendously. And as an industry tailwind, it's been fantastic. So
I'll take, just for the spirit of being a little contrary, right? I'll say that there's no disagreement at all that you should always hack your value chain and decrease your cost, decrease the price that you can ask, find a better margin. That's what being a good entrepreneur is. Certainly interest rates and tax subsidies or credit approaches can impact. However, the ability to make capital available in a short period of time at scale, which is the situation in which we find ourselves. And so even back to de-risking, the ability to find capital that may be less risk tolerant, these sorts of financial mechanisms can help you get over that gap and over that tension. And so, for example, as you're trying to build a generation asset, you have development finance, you have project finance. If you have not taken a project finance course and you want to get into green energy development, I commend you to the topic, because really it is not always on the merit of the project itself or the desire for someone to purchase the energy coming out of that project, but how do you encourage the capital to support what are large, costly structures to put in place. And so I think there is a good role for the government in encouraging infrastructure. There is also a great role for innovative, efficient, and cost-effective technology.
Yeah, that's a great point. Alex or Alexina?
Alexina.
Alexina.
Yeah.
Anyway, the interstate highway system would clearly not have been built without the government. The initial telephone and telegraph systems would not have been built without the government. So in capital-intensive areas, it is certainly true that the government needs to weigh in. And the IRA is, I think, partly in that category. The issue is, the devil's in the details,
Yes,
right?
Always is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you for your questions. They were very thoughtful. I've had a great time moderating this panel, and I'll turn it over to either you or,
Thank you to our moderator and all our panelists for such a compelling discussion on how we can continue to push the boundaries of innovation to scale clean energy technologies. Let's give them a warm round of applause, please.